In 1975, a single nation dwarfed the per capita GDP of the United States and the oil giants of the Middle East. At over $50,000, its income per citizen was double that of the American superpower. This economic titan was Nauru, a tiny, isolated coral atoll in the Pacific Ocean, measuring just 21 square kilometers. The subsequent crash was absolute. By the early 2000s, this immense wealth had vanished, with Nauru's GDP plummeting by more than 90% and leaving the national government functionally bankrupt. The physical landscape mirrored the financial ruin. Today, roughly 80% of Nauru's landmass is a jagged wasteland of exposed coral pinnacles, rendered completely uninhabitable by the very industry that created its wealth. Nauru's trajectory serves as the ultimate case study of the resource curse, a phenomenon where an abundance of natural wealth actively destabilizes a nation's future. Nauru's fortune was built on phosphate. For millennia, migratory birds used the isolated rock as a resting stop, leaving behind thick layers of guano that eventually fossilized into high-grade solid phosphate, a critical component for global agricultural fertilizers. After decades of extraction by foreign powers, Nauru gained independence in 1968 and took full control of its own lucrative mines. Independence triggered massive industrial expansion. Giant cantillators soon dominated the coastline, loading millions of tons of phosphate onto cargo ships bound for Australia. This growth triggered Dutch disease, where a booming export sector captures a country's capital and labor, starving every other industry. On Nauru, the results were total. With mining offering immediate jobs, 90% of the population abandoned subsistence farming and fishing, ending the island's agricultural output. Without local food production, the island became entirely dependent on imports. Cargo ships that arrived empty to collect phosphate would return filled with cheap, highly processed, packaged foreign foods. This dietary shift created a severe public health crisis. By the 1990s, Nauru had some of the highest rates of type 2 diabetes on Earth, with 94% of the population classified as overweight. The first symptom of the resource curse is physical. Sudden wealth can hollow out a population's foundational skills while simultaneously degrading their long-term health. To manage the windfall, the government established the Nauru Phosphate Royalties Trust. By 1991, this sovereign wealth fund had grown to an estimated $1.3 billion. However, the trust lacked structural oversight. The national constitution contained no mandate for an independent auditor general, allowing the government to manage a billion-dollar treasury without basic transparency or accountability. Domestically, the government became a massive, bloated employer. They maintained a public sector of over 1,500 people for a population of less than 10,000, running chronic budget deficits to sustain the high public wages. Internationally, the trust pursued high-risk vanity projects. Millions were spent on everything from a failed London musical to an extravagant global real estate portfolio, including the Nauru House Tower in Melbourne. Without the necessary friction of institutional oversight, a nation's sovereign wealth often serves only to accelerate corruption and deep financial mismanagement. By the late 1990s, Nauru hit the hard physical limit of its geography. The primary phosphate deposits were virtually exhausted, and the mines went quiet. The financial crash followed immediately. Burdened by debt and failing investments, the National Trust's value plunged from $1.3 billion down to just $300 million. Desperate to replace the missing income, the state began selling sovereign economic passports to foreign nationals and transformed itself into a secretive offshore tax haven. An international crackdown ended the scheme. Cut off from global banking, creditors seized the overseas real estate and repossessed Air Nauru's sole airplane. Treating a finite physical commodity as an infinite financial engine ensures that the eventual bust will hit with the same intensity as the initial boom. Nauru's modern GDP has rebounded, but the source of that growth is artificial. Over half of the government's revenue now flows from hosting the Regional Processing Center, a controversial detention camp for Australian asylum seekers. A secondary lifeline comes from the ocean, as Nauru sells commercial fishing licenses to foreign fleets harvesting regional tuna. Despite paying down historical debts, the nation remains hyper-vulnerable. Their entire economic baseline is dictated by forces completely outside their borders, namely global tuna prices and Australian immigration policy. Nauru proves that natural wealth is merely a temporary windfall. Without institutional integrity and economic diversification, the paradox of plenty ensures a nation will dig its own grave.